take to build a strong brand and beat the market? Well, that's the big question, right? And you get the answers here because we are the only podcast that explores the connection between brand and performance in mobile advertising. And here to help us unravel what makes brands massive and memorable is my co-host, VP of Performance and Brand Revenue at Digital Turbine, Ben Holmes. Ben, I have to say, great to have you on the journey here. This is what we do. We explore these questions.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. Super excited to be here. Bridging the gap between brand equity and performance, not easy.
And so we talk to the marketers who are doing this, not just talking about it, doing it, and joining us on this journey into some new territory, some bold territory, is Chris Dalla Riva. He is Senior Product Manager, Data and Personalization at Audiomack. And if you don't know, and you should, by the way, because it does rock, Audiomack is a youth-driven, artist-first music streaming platform that allows creators to share unlimited music and podcast content for free. So, hey, Chris, what a build-up, and it's great to have you here with us.
Yeah, really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Let's get into it. You are a global, successful platform, more than 3 billion monthly streams. You've done a great job in building your brand equity. Now, how would you say that you've gone about kind of building this platform and bringing fans, and how is that you've been able to surpass this 3 billion monthly stream metric?
So currently Audiomack's not a full catalog service, which means that you can't go on and search any song that's ever existed and it will come up. We have a limited catalog, and I actually think that is part of the reason we've been able to build our brand and build it successfully, because we sort of focus on specific genres and specific music scenes that we know really well. We can get feet on the ground in those scenes, and we can make sure the artists and the listeners in those scenes know that we actually do care about them. So it's really the growth of the brand, the growth of Audiomack generally has been going from scene to scene. First it was specific hip hop scenes in the US, and then we really started to take off in various countries throughout Africa. And it's been the same playbook over and over again. As we focus on whatever the specific music scenes are in those areas, we get the content, we get the artists onboarded, and we make them feel like they can win on Audiomack in a way that they can't in other places. And of course, the goal is if you come to Audiomack, you're going to bring your fans. They're going to start listening, and then Audiomack will become their music streaming platform.
So the growth has really been by focusing on the artists first, right? Focusing on that content and expanding into it. So if I'm an artist, why am I going to use Audiomack? Why would I not just go to, the Spotify's or the Apple Music of the world? Like why as an artist am I going to be using you guys?
Yeah, so there's a few different types of ways artists can interact with streaming services. Your Spotify's, Apple's, Amazon's of the world. You can't upload directly. You have to go through a third-party distributor. Third-party distributor requires you to pay either a monthly fee, or they'll take like a percentage of your royalties to pay for them, distributing your music to all the streaming services around the globe. Then there are people like Audiomack and SoundCloud who allow you to upload directly. So that's the first thing, is artists can directly interact with our platform. Secondly, Audiomack has prided itself on not monetizing on the artist side at all. You have unlimited uploads for free, and we also offer artists tons of free tools. For example, we offer artists statistics on where their content is performing, the demographics of their audience. We also just launched a new tool where artists can directly message all of their followers, and it'll come through as an email and a push notification to them. Artists can also monetize their content, among other things. So basically all of our artist tools are free, which is another thing that differentiates us from other platforms that charge for higher grade or advanced tools. Right now, we offer all of that for free to artists. So again, it's a great first place for artists to start, because there's very little friction and you're getting a lot for very little. And by that, I mean for free.
Have you found that the fans follow organically, or are you also having to put some ethic into making sure they are following those content, or is your content creators kind of doing your marketing for you on that part?
Well, I think it's two-pronged. I mean, of course, our content creators are naturally marketers for the platform. If you have your song up on Audiomack and you're going to share it with your fans, you'll bring them along with you. But those people who are willing to go to a streaming service to listen to a specific artist, it's usually a very specific type of fan. It's usually, I call them a power user. We use our marketing, our direct to fan marketing efforts to attract a much wider audience. We don't just completely rely on artists. I mean, we of course have a whole marketing department who spends their days working on stuff like this. So it's a combination of artists being our marketers, but also paid and organic UA brand building that has helped get the Audiomack name out there beyond just artists sharing content from our platform.
Something else that you mentioned earlier about kind of the expansion into different markets as you start to see that. Now, was that something that also happened organically, or was this like planned, methodical Audiomack headquarters, giant map on the wall, dart in hand, we're going to go conquer Tennessee? And I say that just because I live in Nashville. So like we're focusing on this next, right? How did you go about kind of expanding and finding this global footprint of content creators?
So I of course can't take credit for that myself, but we have a wonderful executive team who basically it seems like we notice a trend, like, we noticed there's some organic traction, say a couple years ago in Nigeria. Let's see what's going on there and let's see if we can capitalize on that. What we noticed is that users there had a lot of similarities to users we were succeeding with in the US, albeit they were listening to different kinds of music, but they were looking for a similar solution to what the people in the US were looking for. So I think some of it's, just building a great global brand and then seeing where it's picking up traction and really doubling down on that. It's not always completely like, as you're saying, staring at the map and being like, where are we going to next? There is, of course, some of that because we have an idea of which type of people and which places, which content we have that will succeed. But it's also being reactive and just seeing what people on the ground are doing and seeing if we can, again, double down on that and bring them what Audiomack has brought to people in other places.
So what happens? You identified the market. Now you're ready to lean in. What's next?
I mean, at the end of the day, they always say content is king. And for us, we have tons of different audio content. The most popular, of course, is music. So if we're going to stake our claim in South Africa, for example, you have to have the content that people are interested in there. You don't have to have every single song by every single artist. But if there's nothing that people in South Africa are going to be listening to, they are naturally not going to come to the platform, no matter how nice, your playlisting feature is. They need something to listen to. So South Africa is a great example. There's a subgenre of music down there called Amapiano that's been around for a long time, but it has become one of the dominant cultural forces there recently, and it has spread all throughout the African continent and has really started to cross over into the US and Europe. So a place like that, we're going to have people on the ground there telling us what music is important to people, seeing if we can get it and seeing how we can engage with those artist communities. Because again, when artists feel like they're winning, they're always going to bring along their fans. And that's a key thing, is we always want to make sure that artists feel like they are winning. Some people, we have people directly in South Africa, and some people from our New York office went down there recently to work on some content with popular artists out there.
I am curious. Do you need Peggy and I to head down to Cape Town to help kind of build the Audiomack? Because I'm all whatever it takes for the podcast, and if we should be broadcasting from Cape Town,
Yes.
and I can expense that flight, then sign me up for it.
And make that sacrifice. I'll definitely make that sacrifice.
Make that sacrifice to get down to Cape Town.
I'm always down for a field trip. Have a nicer background than this wall.
I want to talk about the listeners. Your artists first, you give them a place where they feel that they're at home. They've got tools. They can talk to their audience. They can message. They can even get some social media perks from you. You're making assets for them. What's your approach to making certain the listeners feel that you listen to what they want, and very locally, as you point out yourself. There's some cool crossover trends coming to America and Europe, but they started someplace and you had to cultivate those.
Yeah, one thing we've noticed is that when Audiomack started about a decade ago, it was very, very focused on a specific type of hip hop. So curating for the platform, I mean, I won't say it was easy, but it was easier because we knew everyone coming onto the platform was sort of looking for the same stuff. You could curate with a one-size-fits-all approach. As we've gone global, that approach has failed because we've become too successful. People's tastes are too varied. There are very different music cultures. So one way that we've been able to retain listeners is by leaning more and more into personalization, which is something that I work on directly, and making sure that when you open Audiomack and you look at the homepage, that you're able to see music that you're going to be interested in. We always like to say we take a human-centered algorithmic approach, where we try to combine, man and machine. We try to combine algorithmic recommendations with human recommendations. We try to have human curated playlists, but let's have an algorithm surface the playlist that's going to be most relevant to you. And we've had a lot of success with that. And I think that's part of the reason that we've been able to grow in so many places at the same time, is that we can make the app feel local no matter where you are on Earth.
You've brought AI, yes, but also human curation to it as well, which is a great combination. Not too many people are talking about that combination. They're talking about giving it over to AI and, recommendation engines. Tell me a little bit about, one, why you chose it to combine it that way, and two, how it's showing in the actual experience.
We see again and again, artists and listeners know when you are not speaking their language, and I don't mean English, Spanish, or French. I mean the language of the scene that they are in. The people very quickly know if you are, quote unquote, a poser in whatever music scene you are. And having human experts, people who again are on the ground, who know these music cultures very intimately, is a huge, huge asset for us. And that's something that we have to continue to lean into to make sure that artists and listeners trust us. And basically the way we think of using personalization, algorithmic personalization, which is, our algorithmic recommendations are some of the most popular content on the platform, is by combining it with this human-centered approach where we know that we've built trust with our audience on the human side. And because of that, they're more likely to trust an algorithmic recommendation because they know that we are, we try to be the real deal. We try to engage with these scenes directly and organically.
Okay. So step one, get the content in there, right? Step two, then the human plus AI empowered personalization, so that listeners can discover, the content that you're really focusing on bringing in from the localization strategy. Are you also bringing kind of similar techniques when you're looking at how do I expand this user base and, bringing those kind of localized, specialized into your paid marketing to drive new users onto the platform?
Yeah, I would say that's sort of our approach with paid marketing. It all sort of builds up from the same source. For example, we've noticed in Canada specifically over the last year or so, there is a huge South Asian diaspora community who is very into Punjabi music, which is, native to India. And again, we see some people listening to that music and we're like, oh, we really don't have a lot of this content. How can we acquire this content? How can we make sure the people who are already on our app know that we have it? And then how can we show people who are not on the Audiomack app? So in this example, the South Asian diaspora community in Canada, how can we find these people and get them onto the Audiomack app? And again, that's a combination of paid and organic spend.
So I want to dig into that. How did you find people in Canada looking for the diaspora genre of Punjabi music? What were some of the channels within the paid marketing that you really found worked well for this very specific example of Punjabi content in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have across the globe always appealed to very young people, people from their teens to their early 20s. So we're always looking at paid channels that are most going to overlap with those users. Specific places that I know we've had success with are Snapchat and TikTok. Definitely a lot of overlap between people who use those apps, which are namely usually very young people, and people who also use the Audiomack app or might use the Audiomack app. So those are two, I think, specific channels that we've had good success with.
It's interesting because we can't really target that specifically anymore. And so you're using the demographic of what we would think about when we think about these channels. You're using that demographic to guide you when you're thinking about your paid strategy.
Yeah, exactly. We know basic demographic information about our users, age, gender, where they are in the world. And we have a sense of which specifically social apps people like that are on. And that's usually where we're able to, on the paid side, find new users.
Yeah, and it's clearly working, because that's what. So the Digital Turbine Brag Index, what it's designed to measure is how impactful are your paid marketing activity against just kind of general surveys when it comes to overall brand equity. In the wider U.S. consumer base, Audiomack was not the most well-known app, and yet the number of installs that are being driven, that ratio was by far better than anyone else on it, right? Case in point, in our survey, Amazon Music came back as the most widely recognized brand, followed by YouTube, Pandora, Spotify, some of the biggest streaming, apps out there from a brand perspective. Audiomack wasn't there, yet the installs tell a completely different story. Kudos, congratulations.
Thank you.
Does it feel nice to be on top and everyone else is looking up at you?
Yeah, of course it feels nice. I mean, it's the way we always think about it is a company like Amazon and even Spotify, Apple. I mean, these companies have 9-figure marketing budgets. There's certain things better way to put it, certain things we will never be able to directly compete with them with at our current size. And our thing is, let's just double down on the things that we know because of our size, because we know we can move quickly, that we can do better with. We continue to try to double down on is the things that we know we're good at.
Now that you've become first place in the Brag Index, the only real viable option for you in your personal career, Chris, is to go into consulting with very high hourly fees. What would be, hey, I just hired you, you're charging me $5,000 an hour, what's your advice to me as I'm a mid-tier and I think I want to compete with the Spotifys from a budget standpoint, but I just don't have I don't have the deep pockets to really do it. What would be your advice to me to really, find that impact?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've learned directly from our CEO is, you have to have a deep connection with your users and be keenly aware of what issues they're having and things that they like. Because if you can solve those problems, people will come to you. They tell their friends, and that's sort of been the Audiomack story for the better part of 10 years.
So let's stay on the approach that allowed you to achieve this, Chris, because it's really interesting. You're talking about listening to listeners, and that's what your executive did, solving the problem. That is always important. But we also found that it was also search ads that put you in the index. In other words, you have mastered that. And it shows, because people are searching for music in general, but they also search for Audiomack by name.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest source of our installs is people searching directly for our brand. Our CMO has said to me, I guess the term's called drip marketing. It's like, slowly just people becoming more and more aware of your brand by maybe you see Audiomack on a billboard in Jamaica, then you hear an artist talking about it, then your friend says something to you about it. We're always working multiple channels to try to get people who we know typically like the Audiomack exposed to us, and then go out of their way to search directly for Audiomack.
Ben, how does that resonate also with what you're seeing and hearing with the brands that you're working with? Because, it is about product. He's obviously got great product, great CX, but there's also, partnerships with the wider ecosystem, something that really contributes to brand power.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's very fascinating kind of how that approach is taken by every single marketer and kind of where they put more of the emphasis. I'd be curious, from the Audiomack POV, and you're sitting down to think about your marketing strategy, where would you say you put more of that emphasis? Is it really that deeper performance focus where building the brand equity is a nice byproduct? Or are you guys really thinking about, hey, let's build let's build the brand equity, and then any kind of deeper KPI or conversion we might see, that's just the nicer byproduct?
I think a lot of the brand equity is built by artists going out there and saying like, hey, I got 10,000 streams on Audiomack, and Audiomack generates a social asset for them, and they can automatically share it. Or someone saying, oh, I'm uploading this exclusively to Audiomack. Stuff like that really helps us build our brand equity and know what we can put dollars behind, within the search system or just within general UA.
So Chris, bringing it back to the Brag index, right? So we talked about earlier and how, first off, no one makes on the Brag index if no one's ever heard of the brand at all, right? So Audiomack, just to be on the Brag index, is a certain level of brand equity that is present out in market. But I'm curious, how would you say that you guys internally at Audiomack measure the impact of the brand equity that you are creating out in market?
Everyone, especially someone like me who's very data oriented, we want everything to be directly measurable. That's not always the case, and I think it's actually a prevalent fallacy that we ignore things that we can't measure or that are harder to measure. So of course, with direct paid spend, we can measure that. But the thing we're always looking for all of these other efforts, again, say you put up a billboard, or you run a terrestrial radio campaign in Tanzania. That stuff's of course harder to tie back to installs, but ultimately we know the large majority of our users are on our mobile app. We do have a website, but the large majority are on our apps. And we can see which installs are coming from people searching directly for our brand. So the way we try to quantify to the degree that we can our efforts that are not directly measurable is by seeing how strong search directly for our brand remains and how well we convert on those searches. I think that's probably it's not perfect, but it's the best way that we've come up with.
And you're doing it well. That's why you're here. But that's not the only reason, Chris, right? Because we love what you're talking about, but we want to also talk about not just brand, but personal brand. We talk about you, because everyone is more than a title. Now, you've spent the last 4 years, as you said yourself, bringing algorithmic music recommendations and data-driven decision-making to Audiomack. But beyond that, right, you make music yourself. And you write about this at publications like The Economist, Business Insider. You're into knowledge sharing. I have to ask you, what is your focus there? What's your main focus now? I mean, why? You don't have a lot of marketers who share like you do.
And I think there's this fear that, I'm going to share information and suddenly the jig is up, the secret's going to be out, and people are going to be able to replicate what I'm doing. And I think people I work with also think that's sort of silly. There's a lot of people at Audiomack who share tons of knowledge on the internet. It ultimately contributes to the brand building. These people are sharing tips and tricks for artists. They're showing the tools that we have as listeners. I think that transparency actually helps us build our brand. We're very transparent with this stuff because it builds trust.
Interesting point that you made, though, about personal brand and how they're intertwined. I've heard that, but you've made me think about that again. That's very true, and particularly here because of what you're doing. I mean, we met, Chris, when you were out talking about how you solved the cold start problem, which was very cool, and we learned a lot from it. Staying with music, and maybe, Ben, you're also curious. I know I am. You're a musician as well. Tell us about what you do, what you play, where your passion lies.
I play broadly rock music or indie rock music. And over the years, I've gotten a chance to record with some great people. I played in a ton of different bands, and they're not always my bands. I typically play guitar, but one band I play with right now, it's fronted by this guy, John Cause. It's a punk band. I play bass in that group. So you always that's the ultimate fuel of the passion, and why I feel so passionate about working at Audiomack is ultimately being an artist is hard. I know it firsthand, and I would love to give people as many tools as they can to get their music out there, to connect with their fans. To me, there's really no better joy than getting to play music with other people, getting to share it with them. It's definitely one of the biggest joys of my life.
We can, if we can help you out on the ground in Jamaica, or Cape Town, or I got a list. I'll happily share my list of where we can help out with. Just let us know.
Oh yeah, of course. Well,
yeah.
If you can get me there too, I'd love it.
I don't want to make promises. So, yeah. So, Chris, we always ask every guest that comes on to the Mobile Explorer show. There's always 2 questions that everybody gets asked. Pretty abstract, but the first one: what movie title, song title, or lyric comes to mind when you're thinking about the impact of brand on user acquisition?
In the middle of the 70s, Stevie Wonder released a very famous album called Songs in the Key of Life. It won the Grammy for Album of the Year. It's probably his most famous album of all time. And at that time, Stevie Wonder was already wildly, wildly popular. Stevie Wonder had built the Stevie Wonder brand incredibly well up to that point. And when you do that, the question is always like, where do you go? How do you top this? And he ended up making what is considered his magnum opus, Songs in the Key of Life. And it took an incredible amount of time to record. It was delayed a few different times. It had been delayed so significantly that Motown, his label, started printing up shirts that said, we're almost finished. So it built a lot of hype around this album for an artist or a brand that was already hyped beyond what anyone could possibly imagine. And it's, how do you, someone like that is like, how do you keep people coming back time and time again? How do you find new fans when you've already reached so many people? And I think his career specifically in that album and a lot of the marketing around it are a great example for how to do that.
So we've got the last question, Chris. So in 10 words or less, what is the one thing you would love to see happen to drive a better understanding of how brand impacts UA?
Ultimately, I think part of the way paid user acquisition succeeds is by already having a brand that people recognize. There are very few products that are just going to be able to put a paid ad in front of you and you're suddenly going to buy the thing or sign up. I think of a good way to put this.
Can I help you summarize that in 7 words?
Okay, yes.
Yes, let's do it.
If you brand it, they will come. There you go.
Yes. If you brand it, they will come. And of course that requires some explanation. But for most companies or products, you're not just going to be able to put millions of paid dollars behind something and suddenly the users will arrive. It's like people need to trust your brand. People need to have some awareness of your brand. It's usually they've seen it a couple times before, and then maybe that paid ad is the one that clicks. But yeah, if you brand it, they will come is a good way to put it.
I like it. That gives you 3 words left over if you want to,
Lots of it.
Go download Audiomack.
Yeah.
There you go. That's your last 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
You are definitely a veteran marketer, Ben. So it has been a great look into exactly what we need to understand brand. Now we understand the marketing, the strategy, and I got to say, Chris, the passion that makes all this possible. So thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me. This is a great conversation. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, I am all over the internet. I run a newsletter on Substack called Can't Get Much Higher.
So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your expertise today. When you're ready to start that consulting firm, let me know. I will gladly join in.
I'm here for it.
Perfect.
We're up for it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in, fellow explorers. Want to be featured on our next show so you can brag about your successes? Then just click the link below, answer 3 quick questions, and you might find yourself smack dab in the special guest seat on our next show. And thanks again to our sponsor, the Brag Report from Digital Turbine and Apptopia. Mobile Explorers is sponsored by the Brag Report, the industry source of brand-centric insights for a mobile-centric world. Handcrafted by the mobile gurus over at Digital Turbine and Apptopia.